Today I experienced what it must have felt like for early human scholars like Aristotle when they'd sit and ponder the deep, complex issues plaguing society, as well as taking notice of things going on around them and trying to make sense of all of it. And today, my philosophical thought experiment was, why is every single new movie that's coming out flopping? With the exception of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, most new movies that are coming out over the last few months are setting new records for how dog shit they're performing in the box office. These bad boys are flopping harder than LeBron James against the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs. It's getting rough. And I just read this headline here about a movie I didn't even know existed being DreamWorks' lowest opening for anything they've ever made, called Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. It brought in just $5.2 million so far on opening weekend. And this is a $70 million budget, and that doesn't account for any of the marketing costs. So this is looking like a historic bomb here. And this isn't alone. Elemental is still in theaters and is not performing well. It was Pixar's second lowest opening ever, I believe. Like, what's going on here? It was a question that I wanted an answer to, so I got deep into exploring the inner machinations of my mind in order to get an answer. I was nearly ready to draw a bath and really get after it, really exercise my noodle. And following this thought line to its natural conclusion, you reach two questions. Are movies just getting worse, which is why people don't really care to go see them? Or do people just not really have an interest in going to a movie theater anymore? Pretty much everything we do in our day-to-day lives has become extremely convenient, whether it's ordering food or just general entertainment. You can watch pretty much every show and movie from the comfort of your own home. And you don't have to pay individually for each movie you want to see because eventually they hit streaming platforms that you have a subscription to. So, going to a movie theater is inconvenient. You have to drive to the theater. It's also expensive because the ticket prices just keep increasing exponentially. And God have mercy on your soul if you get a little appetite or a little thirsty and decide to buy something from the concession stand, because then you're out another $50 buster, because that shit is outrageously priced. It is downright criminal how expensive things are at a movie theater. I went to see a movie today. I saw the new Indiana Jones. I'll get to that in a moment, but it's what put this discussion top of mind for me. And I bought a water bottle. And not only did they have the gall, the fucking chutzpah, to sell me a Dasani water bottle, but they charged me $8 for the Dasani water bottle. That is sewage. Dasani is literally sewage in a bottle, and I paid $8 for the sludge. I really would have rather paid $8 for each employee there to spit into a cup and I'd drink that. Not only would it taste better than Dasani, but I'd feel less scammed. Point is, it's expensive going to a movie theater and it's inconvenient. So, is that the reason why a lot of people are choosing not to go, leading to so many box office disasters recently? It's a lot of questions that I've been looking at answers for the last few hours since coming back from the movie. And I wanted to just kind of talk about it because I find it so interesting. So let's dive into the first question. Are movies just getting worse? And is that the reason why people aren't bothering to go? Because it's not worth their time to see it? I think the answer to that is probably no. But I do think movies are getting less original. Because the budgets for films have gone up so much, like most films are like $70 million plus budgets. Most of the time even going north of 100 mil, 200 mil, and in the case of like Indiana Jones, 300 mil. These are, and it's an outrageous amount of clams in order to produce a modern blockbuster. So when you're gambling with that amount of money on a movie, most of the higher-ups like to make sure that it's the safest possible investment they can make with it. So they choose to either make sequels or reboots or remakes, something that they know has a built-in core audience. So that's why you see most of what hits theaters these days is kind of derivative of other properties or just straight up a sequel. And I think that leads to a lot of people feeling like they've just kind of already been through this song and dance before. You're not getting a ton of unique experiences from huge blockbusters anymore. And I think that does play a role in it, but I don't think that necessarily means the movies themselves are worse. They're just so much safer. They just play everything super safe and by the book. Now, that's of course not talking about every movie that hits theaters. There's still a lot of companies that are doing lower budget productions that are far more creative and original. Of course, things like A24 and production houses like that. But on the whole, most of the big blockbusters are very generic, and it's food that you've had before. You're basically just getting junk food that you know isn't exactly like the best thing there is, but it's still good enough for a lot of people, and it has been that way for a long time. But I feel like at this point, people are just losing that sweet tooth. They don't really care to just keep seeing the same shit over and over again. Like superhero movies. Superhero movies, even the worst ones, used to still turn a massive profit. It was an infinite money glitch for a while, but now it's been patched. Superhero films aren't guaranteed to make you money. Case in point, The Flash. The Flash came out and it had a crazy marketing campaign behind it. They had all kinds of celebrities singing its praises, celebrities that you would think would hate it. Like Stephen King was going crazy about it, talking about how good it was. Tom Cruise really loved it, saying, this is a certified semen siphoner. It's gonna make you nut, trust me. Kojima just posted a tweet talking about how great it was. Just so many celebrities talking about it being great, which I still believe was some kind of like paid marketing campaign that they haven't disclosed. I still find it so hard to believe after seeing the movie that all of these celebrities lost their fucking mind over it. Like, it's a fine film, but nothing that I think really changed the whole landscape. But they were talking about it like it reinvented the whole superhero genre. And it still bombed in the box office. Now, of course, there are other factors at play, like Ezra Miller and the crime spree Ezra Miller went on that went completely unpunished. There are certain things like that at play with The Flash, but I still think even if that wasn't the case, the movie probably wouldn't have been a glowing success then either. I think there is legitimately superhero fatigue because most people are assuming that they've already seen all of this kind of shit before, so probably aren't going to bother going through the inconvenience and the extreme cost of driving to a theater, paying for the tickets, when instead they could just wait for it to conveniently drop on their favorite streaming platform and watch it from home without spending a fucking dime, really, aside from the subscription cost. And to extend this a bit deeper for today's experience, like I mentioned, I saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's the 5th entry into the Indiana Jones franchise. I actually saw it with my parents. This is the first movie we've seen together since the Avengers movie, the first one, back in like 2012. So we decided to go to the theater and see it together because we all really like Indiana Jones. And it turns out the film is really struggling a bit with a $60 million debut. Now, this isn't exactly like a hard turbo flop or anything, but it's opening to less than what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull opened to back in 2008. And for a lot of people, that movie is considered a legitimate abomination in the Indiana Jones franchise, so I think there is a chance that people just wrote off the franchise after that one and maybe didn't even bother giving this a chance. I'm really not sure. But yeah, the movie is not performing nearly as well as they expected it to, despite the film's budget being like $300 million, which doesn't even account for the marketing costs, at least according to the numbers I'm seeing online. So this is a movie that needed to generate huge buzz, tons of doubloons, in order to turn any semblance of a profit, and it's not looking likely at the moment. So after watching the film, I'll give you like a little pseudo moist meter here. It's a fine movie. I don't think it's very good, but I don't think it's bad either. Like, I wouldn't say that this is an example of a movie that's so shitty that people probably just wouldn't bother going to a theater to see it. It's one of those movies where it doesn't really try to do anything interesting. It plays it very, very safe. You go there, you'll be entertained for the runtime, but it's not something that you'll really remember on the drive home. It's something that's easily forgotten. There's nothing wrong with it. I think there's a lot of goofy moments in it that don't make a whole lot of sense, as well as a couple of plot holes, but I'm not here to do a spoiler review for this. I'll just say overall, it's probably the second worst Indiana Jones movie. I still think it's probably a little bit better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but not by much. It doesn't even come close to the original trilogy. But again, I don't think it's like, an affront to God or anything. It's not horrible. So this wouldn't really be something that I would think would be an example of movies are just getting worse and that's why no one's going to see them. But I do think this is an example of this is a very safe, generic movie that most people probably wouldn't bother to see. In movie theaters, that is. This would be something you'd flip on when you're, just perusing your streaming platform of choice. And you'd throw it on for, some background noise. Or if you need something to kill fucking like 3 hours. This movie is way too long. I'm not just gonna give a whole Indiana Jones review here, but point is, I don't think this is a movie that's so bad that it's scaring people away from going to see it. It's just, I do think it's not a movie that would get people excited to go. They tried to revive a beloved franchise again, and that bet is no longer working these days. Most people have seen through shameless cash grabs that just try and like piggyback off the goodwill of a great franchise that they knew and loved. And I think that's one of the big things that people are now just being kind of more conscientious of. Like, I know it's probably not going to be as good as the originals, so I'm not going to go out of my way to pay a ton of money for the tickets, and I'm certainly not going to pay a ton of money for the drinks and food, because I swear to God, with the prices the way they are, you'd have to choose between paying for a bottle of Dasani or paying for a handful of rare earth minerals. Like, there's going to be like the same cost of a diamond at some point for a fucking bottle of Dasani at a movie theater. But yeah, I don't think that the main deterrent for people going to a theater is movies getting shittier, but I do think them refusing to take big, like, blockbuster risks on new IP or, like, more bold creative projects is definitely something that is not doing them any favors. But I think by far the biggest contributing factor is it's pricing people out. And it's just not convenient anymore, whereas everything else in the world is just getting more and more convenient. Whereas going to a movie theater is going the opposite direction. It's getting less and less convenient and more expensive. So it's just one of those things where I think that's the biggest thing at play here for a lot of these flops that have been happening. Not necessarily that the projects are shittier. Like Ruby Gilman could be an absolute masterpiece. I have no fucking idea. But I don't feel like going to a theater to see it because it doesn't really capture me as like worth the inconvenience of going there for it. Same with Elemental. Elemental just seems like a really kind of generic film. And that's not enough to get me like, in the car, and putting my ass in the seat in order to watch it just to see if it is generic or if it's like great. I don't really feel like bothering with that. And I feel like that's the way a lot of people feel because it's expensive and it's inconvenient. So that's kind of my guess for the flops. Just something I was thinking about today watching Indiana Jones and learning that it was not doing super hot in the box office. And I thought for sure Indiana Jones was going to be a shoe-in for profit, but clearly not. I think the age of being able to just kind of phone it in for movies and blockbusters and being able to make, tons of money off of very lazy writing or very generic storytelling and productions, I think that age is kind of behind us now. I think in order to stand out in the box office, it's being proven recently that you need a very strong, good movie. Like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That film is absolutely exploding. Another good example is Puss in Boots 2. Like, I think now we're entering an age where people are only going to go to a theater if it really seems like something special that will be worth their time and they'll get a great experience out of it. As opposed to how it used to be where people just kind of go to a theater to see anything, even if it looked kind of generic, because, they were in malls and everyone was out and about, like in malls and shit. So, I'll check out the newest superhero film just because it's there and it'll probably just be, some mindless entertainment for a little while. And it wasn't that expensive back then compared to now. So I just think times are changing in the movie industry and the top level execs aren't really realizing that. So they're just pouring more money into generic films, safe films, things they perceive as safe, and they're not getting the returns that they're expecting anymore, which I think is an overall good thing. I'd love more creative projects. I think everyone would. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. That's it. See ya.